Thank you. So I'm 15 years old. I walk into the tent, and it is eerily quiet. It's one of those army issue tents, a kind of giant one where the flaps go almost all the way down to the ground. And there are 6 army cots in there, and all the beds are made they kind of have like jazzy duvets on them and some little stuffed toys, but they're all perfectly regimented. And the reason they're perfectly regimented is that if you don't perfectly regimentedly make your bed, it will get thrown on the floor and you will have to go outside and do exercises at 7 a.m. in front of everyone before you've had your breakfast, which is no fun. I started going to summer camp when I was 8 years old, and we don't really have summer camp in my country, but my granny's Russian church organized one, and it seemed like fun. And when I was 8, I still wet the bed, so the whole inspection thing was like mildly traumatic, but I went back again when I was 10, and that was where I met my best friend, and it was the kind of best friendship that sometimes you make when you're 10 that's like, you are my person forever. And she actually now lives 3 streets away from me in Toronto, and I'm godmother to her kids. Like, you know, the true love that we made there continued, the true best friendship love. And it was her that I had talked to the night before, but I didn't do a good job of talking to her because I didn't know what to say. I had just found out my mum had called the camp to say that my granddad, who I'd lived with since I was a baby, had had a stroke and had gone from being completely lucid to suddenly not really knowing how to speak and not recognizing anyone that came into the room. And I had never experienced grief before, really, and I just didn't quite know what to do with this. And so I tried to talk to my best friend about it, you know, when our beds were up and we were whispering at nighttime the night before, but I didn't really have the words. And then the next day, we did the inspection and we went to breakfast. And afterwards, there were lessons, which at the age of 15 was mostly like having kind of religious-ish discussions. And I'm rulesy, not because I think the rules are worth following, but because I really hate being told off. And lessons were compulsory, but it felt like talking about anything just felt pointless. And so I snuck out the back and I went to my tent. And it wasn't just my tent that was deserted. It was 120 people's worth of tents, all completely deserted. It was really strange to be there in this silence. But suddenly I heard a little rustle coming from the tent next door. And I stuck my head out and went, psst. And this mop of hair stuck his head out. And it was John, who was my best friend's little brother. He was 2 years younger, and because we'd kind of at this point been living in each other's houses on and off for the 5 years that we'd been friends, his sister and I knew him really well, and I was like, what are you doing? And he said, I'm bunking off lessons. What are you doing? And I said, me too, come over here. And he came over into my tent, and I went, John, do you want to go for a walk? And he kind of looked out of the field because we knew that if we walked into the field, immediately someone would spot us and we'd get told off. And he went, where? And I went, that way, and pointed out the back of the tent. And our tent was maybe 20 feet from the perimeter of the whole camp, and we did not go off-site. And being John, he just went, okay. So we snuck out the back of the tent and we went into the woods that were behind the camp. So we're walking in the woods, but it's like, okay, you know, sometimes we'd like go into the woods 10 or 20 feet, but we get through to the back of the woods and we look up and all we can see is the top of the mountain we're on. This camp was in Wales, in South Wales, these giant rolling mountains. And so we just start walking up the mountain. And we're chatting a little bit, but not about anything. And sometimes we're in silence. And because John is family, it just felt easy. And I don't really know, like, we didn't have a plan, you know. We were going to keep walking, but, like, I was 15 and he was 13, and we didn't have any money and really no skills. So I don't know if we thought we were just going to, like, live on the mountain and eat bilberries, which are, like, kind of like blueberries, but cooler because they're Welsh. And but we just kept going, and we kept going, and, you know, chatting and not chatting. And then finally, we're just about to crest the mountain when we hear this, oi! And we look down and see this guy, Benji, who probably was 21, but to us was so old and an absolute giant. And John and I looked at each other and without a word, burst out laughing and just started running up the mountain. And if we didn't have a plan for where we were going to live forever, I definitely don't know what our plan was in trying to outrun this giant. But we're running and we're laughing so hard that it's actually very hard for us to keep running. And eventually Benji with his giant legs catches up to us and is like, stop running, turn around, we'll talk about this when we get back to camp. And we walk back down the hill, trying to smother the laughing that we're still doing. And after that, we got talked to, we got told off. I got to learn the skill of doing what we now call pulling the funeral card, which is when a really crappy thing happens to you, you then use it as an excuse to get out of everything for the rest of your life. So I don't think I got into too much trouble. But what I remember best is that in a moment where I didn't know how I was ever going to laugh again, laughing such deep belly laughs and knowing that John was the only person I could have done that with. Thank you.